views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. So many different things have happened in the borough of the Bronx since the pandemic began, and maybe one of the most unfortunate, and frankly, it's been an epidemic, if you will, all over the city, is an increase in shootings. So far in the Bronx, we've had more than 315 shootings, which is just unacceptable for anybody who tracks these things and anybody who cares about health and the people of the Bronx. Just by comparison, there were just under 200 shootings at this time last year. So there has been a sharp increase. Tonight's guest has taken a very firm stand about guns in the Bronx and even ran a gun buyback program. And we're going to ask her about that and many other criminal justice issues. My pleasure to welcome back to Bronx Talk the District Attorney of the Borough of the Bronx, the Honorable Darcel Clark. District Attorney Clark, nice to have you with us.
Hello, how are you? Thank you for having me again, Gary.
We're doing well, and I know like you and your staff, you're all trying to stay healthy, and that's what we're doing. You know, one thing before we get into the guns thing, which I know is important to all of us, I'd heard that you had added some new staff. You had brought on some new assistant DAs.
Yes, I did.
Just talk about what your vision is of your office and how it's working.
Well, see, usually we bring in a class every fall, and I hire and interview them the fall before. So this happened. I interviewed these lawyers last year at this time. So they're now just coming to the office this year. They were third-year law students, when I interviewed them. So they've since graduated, have to take the bar, and this is their first job. So we are happy to welcome 61 new assistant district attorneys to the Bronx.
Well, I think people would be interested to know, what do you look for when you look for new assistant DAs in the Bronx? You know, what is the kind of thing that makes you say, this is the person I want to have on my staff?
I want somebody that understands the role of a 21st century prosecutor, that is not just as it was when I started. And Gary, you go back with me, nail them and jail them. The police just lock everybody up, and we filled Rikers Island with a whole bunch, full of people. Some of them, had mental health problems, drug problems. Some of them didn't even really belong in jail, but that's how we handle those things. So it's not nail them and jail them anymore. Now it's looking at the person who's arrested, listening to the victims of the crime, making sure that we're the voice for the voiceless, but at the same time, making sure that we're working in a system that's fair, also to the defendant, but most importantly to the community. That is something that we make sure that there's justice for the community, meaning everybody that has to be affected by the system.
I know I had numerous conversations about this with your predecessor, with Robert Johnson, and you and I have had a number of conversations about it over time. And you talked about nail them and jail them. I mean, I would never even think of a phrase like that. But there's really been a continuing effort from the Bronx DA's office to find alternatives. And one of the issues now with the pandemic and everything else, I think we're going to talk about that, tangentially a lot through the program this evening. But just talk to me about how important it is, and in a way, how difficult it is to get people the kinds of treatment that would prevent crime rather than dealing with it after the fact, which unfortunately you have to do on a daily basis.
That and that's the sad part of this, is that the role of the DA and the police is to be the answer to everything. We should be at the end of the spectrum, not at the beginning. If something goes wrong, people automatically pick up the phone, they call 911, you get the police involved in a situation, and then from there, it ends up being something that the district attorney has to handle. If we had a society where all the systems in our society worked, then the prevention side could happen and people would not have the on-ramp into the criminal justice system. So like we talk about mental health, if somebody is in crisis, right? Let's say I have a family member in crisis, they haven't been taking their meds or they're going through something, I should be able to pick up the phone and not call 911, but call 211 to have mental health professionals who are trained to de-escalate situations, trained to understand people who are going through a crisis situation, and for that family to know that somebody that understands that situation is going to come and help them. But instead, because we don't have enough resources in our community, and especially the Bronx, and Gary, you and I are Bronx people through and through, we are always first in things bad and last, first, last in everything good, first in everything bad. We need more resources. So therefore, that situation, that person in crisis, the police come and things sometimes turn terribly wrong. And then I am on the other end of that as well. So we need to do more on the prevention side. And that's what a prosecutor has to do. I should be involved in prevention, prosecution, re-entry. It's the whole package. And that's what I look for in my lawyers. And that's my vision for the office and for the Bronx.
Which leads us right to the current day. And again, I'm going to put guns aside for just a moment, because we know of the health issues that we have. We know about the food insecurity that we have. You just have to, I saw some lines in the Bronx in the rain this morning that were just beyond upsetting, an absolute disgrace that we have.
We have it right here in our building. The Department of Probation has a pantry, and it's around the corner.
It's just so disturbing. But what flies under the radar, it's been mentioned, is the notion that people who may not get along so well are cooped up together and have been cooped up together for months. And you could look at, and I know you do look at the numbers every day of, for example, domestic violence complaints, child abuse complaints. But and you can say, wow, we have many fewer. But I don't think there's any doubt, and I want you to weigh in on this, that these things are happening, but because people are trapped, they're not able and don't feel free enough to report them. So why don't you just address how you envision the DV problem right now, and what your experience is? Has it come to your attention? Are you able to address it? Do you see very difficult cases that you might have been able to help had you heard about it earlier? Give us the whole story.
No, I understand. Well, first of all, we're ending Domestic Violence Awareness Month, although we need to be aware each and every day. You see, I have my purple ribbon on here.
Yes.
Yeah. So, no, you're absolutely right about the pandemic. What's unfortunate is now victims are behind doors with their abusers and nobody knows. Nobody gets to have eyes on them. Usually, if it's a situation where at least the survivor or the victim can go to work, people at work may see that they don't look well, they have bruises, things like that. So there are other people that can become involved, even if the victim doesn't do it, that can alert the police and others and my office as to the fact that there's some domestic violence going on. Same thing with child abuse. When the pandemic started, it was like, wow, so few calls. You would think when you hear, very few, less child abuse calls, less domestic violence, oh my God, we handle this thing now. We're not, we don't have the problem anymore. It's gone away. No, the thing is that they're behind closed doors with their abusers and nobody else is getting a chance to see them. The schools were closed. Normally a teacher, another student, the nurse, somebody at the school would see that something was happening to the child, but these things weren't happening. But we continue to be ever present on social media, on television. I have a crime victims assistance unit, which was still processing. Now, we were still getting cases. Don't get me wrong, because there were some people that could still report for themselves, victims or neighbors that hear things. So they, people did still report. So we still were prosecuting those cases. But what my crime victims assistance unit did was not only help those new victims, but we reached out to people that we've already served, just
Ah,
to check in on them, to make sure that they were okay. And we service, hundreds of them, thousands of them, reaching back to old cases that were even finished just to make sure that they were okay. So that's how we kept in touch with it.
check in and see how you're doing. Is there a phone number for I mean, somebody who's watching us right now and says, if I can sneak away and make a phone call, is there a helpline?
We have a helpline on our website. You could go to our website, www.bronxda.nyc.gov, and all the information is there. The website for crime victims, the helpline, whatever you need. And quite frankly, if it's really an emergency, don't look up anything. Call
Oh,
911.
911, absolutely. And if you call 911 and it has to go toward the Bronx DA, she'll get it. She'll find out.
Exactly.
All right, let's talk about guns. As I mentioned at the top, we had more than 315 shootings in the Bronx this year so far, more than 100 more than we had last year at this time. But before we get into how we're dealing with it and your gun buyback, why do you think that is? And I guess we have to ask the question, do we think the police have done a slowdown? Do you think the pressure on the police has caused them to maybe not be as diligent with, search and seizure, those kinds of things? What's your evaluation?
No, it's a lot of it. I mean, COVID is one of the driving forces. People were cooped up behind closed doors. There's a lot of things going on. People are desperate. You know what I mean? There's a lot of desperation out there. People are sick. They've lost loved ones, as we know that everyone has. People have lost their jobs. They're in behind closed doors with their kids, being a teacher and a parent and everything else. This builds up a lot of pressure and tension. And added to that are those situations where we have young people, we have gang members who are looking at social media, different beefs go back and forth. Some of the silliest things, people go after each other because you said this about me on Instagram, or you said this about me on Twitter. And when the city finally began to reopen, all of a sudden people just started coming out and settling scores, with guns. And the masks, I have my mask here. I got to tell you, that doesn't help, because now they think they're anonymous. They're going out with a gun, broad daylight, because they look like this. They think, oh, I didn't know that that's Darcel Clark. But you know how many people recognize me even with the mask on? So,
Well, you're somewhat recognizable for obvious reasons. We can appreciate that.
Well,
But
that's
I
what I said. I
understand.
couldn't go and rob a bank or pull out a gun because somebody might still recognize me. But my point is that people are wearing the mask and they think that they're in disguise. So therefore, they are at will, shooting these guns. And look, let's face it, we also have to work on the flow of guns into the Bronx. I'm looking out my window now at Yankee Stadium, 161st Street. There are no gun shops on this block, but yet and still, there's so many people that have guns. And we started now seeing incidents now. Not only is it a shooting, but the other side shoots back. So it's way too many guns.
That is
way too many.
Yeah, that is wild. I want to just go back to what you started with, and that is the level of frustration. One thing you didn't mention, which is so prevalent, the loss of jobs, the loss of economic stability, and people worried about simply paying we talked about food, simply paying their rent, having enough to feed their kids. And you know what? They say, you know what? I'm going to get mines. And they have access to that weapon. If they didn't have access to the weapon, maybe they would do something, of a criminal nature, but it wouldn't involve the potential of getting somebody shot and killed. Maybe they'd steal we don't want anything like that. But
Right.
I just think that the level of frustration, and we're hearing it, also, it probably doesn't come your way that much, but with, the loud vehicles that are bursting through neighborhoods. The Times did a story about how many people are outfitting their cars just to make noise. That to me is just an expression of this frustration. And unfortunately, guns availability. Let's talk about availability. Where do you think they're coming from? I mean, I'm not aware of any gun shops, not only on 161st Street, but anywhere in the Bronx. I mean, we don't have them, but everybody has one. Where are they getting them?
Well, the thing is that New York, thank God, has some of the toughest gun laws in the country. So what that does is that makes us a market state where other states where it's easy to get a gun, will transport those guns up here because they know they can get a lot of money for them. So we're on what's called the iron pipeline. It's Pennsylvania. It's mostly, Pennsylvania and some of the southern states, Georgia, where you can just, almost walk in the store and just buy one. You don't have to have a license, no background checks, all kinds of states like that. And what people are doing, they're buying them cheap.
And so let me just ask you about that. So Bronx people are going somewhere else, or is it somebody there coming and then coming up to a neighborhood?
It's some of both. It's some of both. We've had we do gun trafficking investigations all the time. That's part of my crime prevention as well, or the law enforcement side of it is to prosecute people who are bringing guns to the community.
I got to understand this. So if I'm not doing it, but if I were to go down to, Georgia or go to Pennsylvania, and I've driven through there, both places, and I've seen gun stores, and I want to buy a gun and I show my Bronx, New York driver's license, they won't say I can't sell out of state.
Some places don't.
I got to tell you, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's the problem that we have in this country, that you have some states that don't require anything. It depends on where you are. We need background checks. Some states will have, okay, you're allowed to buy, but you got to wait 3 days so we can do a background check. That's why there's always been a push in this direction, at least when we talk about these mass shootings and everything else. I don't need mass shootings. I got mass shootings now because I had 325 incidents of shooting. That's mass shooting to me, because every day I have people shooting, and I have people not only shooting, but people getting shot, actually being hit by those, guns. We had 391 victims of of shooting crimes already. And we're not at the end of the year yet. Last year we had only 200. Yeah. This year we've had 391.
Talk to me about the gun buyback. Number one, how did it work? And number two, honestly evaluate how successful. Listen, one gun off the streets is successful, but just give us the universe about how that looked.
Okay, well, this was the third gun buyback that I did. And what this is in a community event, because we need to get the guns off of our streets and the guns out of people's homes. Because what can happen is that you have children there that can be accidentally shot. We had a case recently, a month or two ago, cases pending, where 8-year-old girl was shot in her apartment here in the South Bronx.
Listen, we talked about DV. I mean, if people not getting along, it's one thing, and God forbid they use their hands or even a knife or something. But it's another thing if they have a weapon. Then
That's right. So you have domestic violence. You have people with, suicidal. This COVID pandemic has really challenged the mental health of a lot of people. You have a gun there, somebody might decide that they want to end it all, and the gun is there, and that can happen. So we needed to do more to get the guns not only off the street, convince people not to carry them because of the penalties. Of course, a loaded gun is a Class C felony. The maximum years is 15 years in prison. But it's one of those charges where there's a mandatory minimum, meaning that if you're convicted after trial, the minimum amount of time that you're going to receive in prison is 3.5 years. So, when I went out to do this gun buyback, which was people could come, it's an amnesty day, no questions asked, bring in the gun. You don't have to give your name, address, phone number, email, or anything, as long as it was operable. For a handgun or assault weapon, you got a $200 gift card. For rifles and air guns, it was $25. That's how we normally did it. But in light of these times, I wanted to do something more. I wanted more of an incentive. So I decided that I'm going to offer more than just a $200 gift card. And I went out and I solicited donations of iPads.
Oh, yes.
iPads can help people. We got kids at home, remote learning. A lot of our kids in the Bronx, again, being first in things that are bad, they don't have the technology to connect to school. So I figured you get an iPad. We have the highest unemployment rate in the city. You have parents, caregivers at home that don't have jobs, could use that iPad to connect, to do a Zoom interview, try to get a job, etc. So I was able to get a donation of 75 iPads. Wow. But every time I looked out my window, I was like, I know I got more partners out there. And I reached out to the New York Yankees and I told them, you needed to be a partner in this. You're the Bronx, just like we are. You care about the community. Help me with these incentives. And the Yankees reached out to me and they matched the donation that I had of 75 iPads. So I had 150 iPads on hand for people that turned in those handguns. And it made a big difference because we got 136 guns last Saturday.
Congratulations. And
Thank
you know, believe me, I'd like to hear that you got 2,000, but that's a good start. And you know, the whole mentality of the way you presented it is exactly what we've been talking about. I believe, and yes, there are criminals, there are hardened criminals, there are people, you know, that's the gang members, and that's the lives they lead. But in many cases of the things that we talked about are things that spun out of control by law-abiding family members who are frustrated. You know what? My kids are going to eat and I'm going to take care of it myself. And I understand that mentality. I don't agree with it because we people like that, but with the level of frustration, I understand it. And then if you say to them, we're going to give you a little bit of a solution to your problem. In other words, you'll get something that'll help your family. I could see somebody saying, you know what? It's not worth me chancing 3.5 years minimum in jail. Get rid of the weapon, transform our lives. I think it's great.
Right.
Is there follow up to that? Are you going to do it again? I mean, you know,
Well, I
I
do.
want as much
I've
of this
had
as I
3
can
of them.
get.
I
I'm
usually
selfish.
do them. I usually do them every other year. Like this, the Bronx was the last borough for this year. Every borough has had one. I won. You know, the Bronx won. So big ups to the Bronx. We got the most guns. But it's something that, you know, you have to. You could periodically do it, but you know, it's something that people, you got to have the incentives. I really think the incentives made the difference. And I even went out into the community to announce it to people. So I went on the street, you know, different business corridors and housing projects. I had my team go out and stuff. And I had some very interesting conversations with people on the street. Some people saying, well, this ain't the time to give up your gun. You know, it's dangerous out here. I'm not giving up my gun. And I simply said this to them. I said, you know what? That's a choice for you to make. I'm giving you a chance right now. This is amnesty. No questions asked. Turn it in and you'll get something. I said, but if you don't take advantage of this day that I'm doing it, when you get caught, there will be questions asked. There will be arrests because here with the amnesty, no arrests, no questions. If you choose to hold on to it and you get caught with it afterwards, it's mandatory minimum of 3.5 years. You're going to prison. You're going to prison because we don't need the guns.
You know, which brings up another aspect of this. Is there a percentage? I mean, I know you don't necessarily know about the guns that were turned in, but do you have a sense of the percentage of illegal versus legal firearms? I mean, you can have a legal firearm.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they bought it legally or not. We have no way. We don't ask any questions. We don't know anything. They're simply turned in. The police department is there. The firing range people are there. They disengage them and they're destroyed. We never know.
You and I have had through this program a discussion about alternatives to violence and alternatives to incarceration and prevention of you know, those kinds of things. And I'm going to tell you what I think. This is my editorial comment. I think the phrase defund the police is a mistake phrase because you know better than even I know, we need good police officers. We need policing in our neighborhoods. We know that when something happens that, you know, is the first person we want to have shown up at our door. That I wish there was another way of phrasing defund the police so it wasn't as stark like we're creating war against our police.
Right.
I know police officers and I have beyond respect for them. So let's just—
I'm married to one.
I wasn't aware of that, but okay. Let's just talk about, you know, your vision of, let's say, police budgets or criminal justice budgets in the city. How should it be looked at in what is now really a changing look at how we deal with criminal justice? And frankly, you've already addressed a lot of it in talking about prevention.
Right, exactly. And that's what I mean. Is so many systems, you know, we have people who are homeless, we have people who are mentally ill, we have people with substance use disorder, we have people who are not getting a decent education, you know, they don't have a job. Those systems need funding. And what we need to do is give money to those areas of our community in order to lift up the community, and that will help prevent people from coming into the criminal justice system. That will prevent the police from having to have encounters with those people because of those problems. Those are the things that bring the people into the criminal justice system and engage the police. Every opportunity we have for the police to have less engagement like that,
under duress, under pressure,
yes, or really, that is a situation that is a criminal situation where the police have to take action and make an arrest. Every time we can avoid those types of encounters, and instead the police should encounter the community at the community centers and the block parties, and just really be enjoying each other, the community respecting the police and the police respecting the community. That's the engagement we want to have, not the opposite, the adversarial engagement. So that's what I think that is meant by defund the police, is like put funding where it belongs so that the police don't have to be responsible for those areas. You could go somewhere, there could be a homeless person that lives on a particular block, shop owners or people, they sleep in the lobby of somebody's building. I want this person out here, get them out of here. What do? They call the police, and then the police have to come. That shouldn't be the police. We have a Department of Homeless Services. They're the ones that should be engaging in those things. So I think that's where we're talking about. When we're talking about funding, we're talking about fund the community, fund resources in the community that will help people not have to get involved with the criminal justice system.
One of the things I appreciate whenever I interview the Bronx District Attorney is she does straight talk. You know what she means. So I want you to just express very clearly, if we do that, do you believe, and do you have even anecdotal evidence that it will actually affect the crime numbers? Because what we hear is people saying, you know what, that's all BS, because we have got to, get these people off the streets, and, we need, kind of work from the other direction. So I know you're committed to it, but I'd love to, get the soundbite and have you just say, if we do this, I believe this will be the effect on us.
I really do. If you put the resources into really having mental health centers in our community that can really help people, outpatient or even inpatient. Let's say somebody who has a mental illness does commit a crime. Perhaps the answer is not throw them in jail, but put them in a therapeutic setting where you could address the mental illness which is causing the crime, and not just because they're just doing it because they want to be a criminal. Somebody is drug addicted. We have a lot of drug centers and everything like that, but we need to do more to engage.
Madam DA, we really got to get going. So thank you so much. I remember that I saw a person who was drug addicted and overdosed on the street. They called the police. Goodness gracious, there's other ways to deal with it. Listen, we got to run. You're the best. Thank you, the Honorable Darcel Clark, and we'll see you around town. Let's keep fighting to keep people safe and happy.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you for all you do, too. It's always a pleasure.
No problem. All right, folks, we'll see you next week. We'll probably do a little post-election show next week. Who knows? So many things going on. We'll take care of it on Bronx Talk. Good night.